let that urgency and determination and anger turn into despair. It has to turn into action, and it has to turn into hope. And the action that we took last year, the biggest climate action in human history, should give all of us hope. It should not make us complacent, but it should make us motivated to replicate that across the planet and do even more.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. This is Lisa Friedman with the New York Times. Thanks for doing this today. Senator Markey, you spoke to the fossil fuel phase-out. That is the biggest issue right now at this summit. If the U.S. were to agree, it would presumably mean also halting LNG exports or moving down that path. Senator Murkowski, others, can you tell us, do you think that the U.S. here should support language around a fossil fuel phase-out?
I'm going to punt on this and recognize that we've got 2 days here for this conference to figure out what the wording will actually be, and I think that we should not be in the situation acting as the negotiators, but as one who comes from a producing state that again feels that there is much to offer, not only Alaska and the country, but to our global partners. To move to a phase out, I think does not recognize the transition reality that we're currently facing. We have permitting issues, we have supply chain issues, and we have other barriers that are in front. So I told you I wasn't going to tell you what I was going to do, and then I told you what I feel about it.
Next question.
As chairman of the, if I could, as chairman of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, we've done a lot of work over the last several years with something called HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons. It's refrigerants, if you will, in our refrigerators, our freezers, our chillers. And it's 1,000 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon, 1,000 times more. And we went through a lot of negotiation to decide whether or not we should try to get rid of it altogether, phase it out, or phase it down. We've ended up at a compromise to phase it down over the next decade or so by about 85% over a period of a number of years. It's worth that one thing alone, that one step alone, is worth in terms of climate change. It's worth about a ½ degree centigrade in reducing our Earth's temperature. Just one thing. And if we had to argue forever about a phase out as opposed to a phase down, we'd still be arguing. So sometimes you have to decide what's a reasonable compromise and a principled compromise, and that's what we've done.
Next question.
Jennifer Delowy with Bloomberg News. Thanks for doing this, especially given the CBAM. Does the U.S. need to adopt an explicit national carbon price to escape a levy and, of course, drive emission reductions at home? And I'm curious what has been your message to European counterparts about kind of the status of that, the prospect of that in the near future?
Senator Whitehouse.
We have a bill, the Clean Competition Act, that would do precisely that. I think that to a certain extent, its fate depends on the realization in our country that the EU CBAM is really coming. Most people don't know that it exists. But I think as we see it coming and as we see the tariff obligations begin to become more specific and clear, the prospect for legislation that obviates the tariff requirement and capitalizes on what the CBAM will already do to help America, which is to move supply chains to the United States from other more carbon-intensive economies. I think that the opportunity will emerge, so I'm very optimistic about the prospects, but the timing has to play out in a rational way.
Next question.
Maha Htait, Asharq TV. Are you satisfied with the U.S. contribution to the Loss and Damage Fund? Do you think developed countries should pay more to this fund?
Let me take that. Yes, I think we need to meet our obligations, but the point I was raising is that sometimes it's not recognized the other areas where the United States is contributing to the global south, contributing to those countries that don't have the full capacity to meet their own needs, to deal with the challenges that have been caused. And as I pointed out, in 3 programs alone, over 2 years, we have contributed $8.5 billion in those accounts that go directly to renewable energies, to establishing manufacturing in solar, in wind power. The list goes on and on and on. So the United States has been very actively engaged through our contributions through our taxpayers to help build the capacity of those countries that otherwise would not be able to meet their obligations. Next question.
Hi, Zoe Schlanger with The Atlantic. Thank you for doing this. This is a question for Senator Murkowski. You have a strong record on climate change, and I think everyone appreciates that you're the only Republican here today. But I was wondering, you're here with small island states who are very much saying that their countries will cease to survive if all of the oil that could be exploited is removed and burned. And you also support the Willow Oil Project in your state. I was wondering what you would say to those small island states who are asking you not to do that very thing.
There is a recognition and an appreciation that in my state, we too are seeing the impacts of climate change. We're seeing that with coastal erosion, the permafrost thaw, the wildfires. We are seeing that. And so there is a responsibility that we have. The question, though, is do you take this approach that we can just, quote, keep it in the ground and still allow for the technological development that is going to be required to move us to that next place? So many of these small islanded countries are not unlike parts of Alaska, where we are powered, our villages are powered by diesel-powered generation, by diesel that we fly in. That's not sustainable. And it's not sustainable for them either. And so let's figure out how we get off of that. But we can't flip that switch and make it happen tomorrow. So this is a collective effort. But it should not be viewed as one where you are penalizing those who are trying to ensure that we can use the resources that we have to help develop the solutions that it will take to address the problem for those small islanded nations and the small villages in a place like Alaska.
Next question.
There we go. Alex Newman here with the New American Magazine. There was a poll released several months ago. AP North Center for Public Affairs Research found that less than half of Americans even believe that human activity is causing climate change. About a third are willing to pay even a single additional dollar on their electric bill each month to deal with climate change. And with the very real prospect of Trump coming back to the White House in 2024, how is the U.S. government planning to make credible commitments on funding and on these other issues that you guys are talking about?
Senator Coons, who chairs that committee.
That was part of why I spoke to what I think is both the structure of the Inflation Reduction Act, which has directed tens of billions of dollars already to construction projects in predominantly red states or politically conservative states, and to the way that we've been able to get out of my subcommittee and pass through the full committee an additional $1.5 billion in investment in combating climate change, predominantly in the global south, with an overwhelming bipartisan margin. So am I suggesting that were the former president to be our next president, everything would be fine? Not at all. But I'm saying that there is a broad enough and deep enough support for continuing investments to combat climate change and for the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law in particular that we will continue. We'll continue to move forward regardless.
Next question.
Hi, Alec Loon, New Scientist. There's, of course, a lot of optimism around what the U.S. is doing, but as Senator Markey mentioned, OPEC has written a letter urging countries here to not commit to a phase-out of fossil fuels. There was a report that at least 2,400 fossil fuel lobbyists are here at this conference, and, of course, the COP president, who now is working on a text to give back to the country delegates, is the head of a fossil fuel company. Are you not worried that the fossil fuel lobby at this conference is too strong and that it will water down the end result and that there won't be the kind of climate action that we're talking about here?
Senator Schatz.
Thank you for the question. I think that the engagement of the fossil fuel industry at this COP is an indicator that these COPs very much matter. There's always a conversation about whether these voluntary declarations have an impact. If they didn't, it wouldn't have the fossil fuel industry so nervous. I think their nervousness is increasing because our success is increasing, and they understand that their business model is in peril. And back to the previous question, the truth is climate action is popular. Climate action is good for the economy. Whenever the American Congress passes a big transformative bill, it is almost certain that in the midterm elections, the party in power loses power, and they usually make television advertisements criticizing the bill that was just passed. Affordable Care Act, Clinton's health care reform attempts, and all the rest of it. In this particular instance, they didn't run hardly a single ad about the Inflation Reduction Act. Why? Because it's very popular and it's working. And so, yes, we should be vigilant and worried, and there should be better disclosure of who is here and for what purpose. But I take this as a sign of our continued momentum.
Yeah, Ben, can I just
Senator Markey?
Young people of the world should be very afraid that OPEC and global oil and gas companies are working to water down this report. OPEC and the oil companies right now are trying to whitewash the crisis that has been created by fossil fuels. And U.S. companies are part of this as well. We can't preach temperance from a bar stool while we ourselves are drunk on oil and natural gas that the United States exports every single day. Our companies don't want to stop doing that either. So young people should be very afraid that OPEC and oil and gas companies from other countries right now are working very hard to ensure that the words phase out are not part of this agreement, and that's going to slow down the pace at which the world has to move to avoid the worst, most catastrophic effects.
Senator Carper has
Yeah, thanks so much. We were up all night in the United States Senate debating the IRA about 2 years ago, and we finished up just before dawn, and I left Washington, caught a train, went back to Wilmington, Delaware, where I live, not too far from where Joe Biden's home is. And I decided before I go home I was going to have a cup of coffee. I went to a convenience store, we call them Wawas. If you've ever been on the East Coast of America, you've been to a Wawa. And I drove to the Wawa, it's close to my house, and I got there, and the sun had just come up, and I went and I got a small cup of coffee, and I went to the cashier to pay for it. And she said, "Senator, you've been up all night, haven't you?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "I know what you've been doing." And she said, I just want to thank you. And I said, I had a small cup of coffee. She said, your coffee's on us. And I said to her, could I have a bigger cup of coffee? And she said, no, but you can have a small cup of coffee. And she said, she went on to say that, she said, I have a son and a daughter, they're 13 and 14. And she said, I want to make sure they have a planet to grow up on and a planet to grow old on. And I said, that's what I want for them as well. But I want to make sure they have a good job or good jobs so they can support their families. If you look at what's gone on in the economy in the last 2 years since we enacted the IRA, only good stuff. Unemployment down, we're kind of record levels. Inflation trending down. The things that should be down are down. The things that should be up in terms of a strong economy are up. And that's pretty good stuff to have to be able to today. Let's do more of this.
Yes.
This is our last question before very brief closing remarks.
Okay.
Thank you. This is Mario Simaco from Utopia, an international news magazine. I have 2 questions from something that outraged delegates from and representatives from the Global South here at this conference. One is why the loss and damage do you think should be managed by the World Bank? Many delegates from the Global South found it very inappropriate and believe that it should be managed by local institutions. And the second question is about what you think about the outrage that happened yesterday with the protest was mostly about the United States decisions to veto the ceasefire, if you wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
I think we're not going to comment on the second question because this really is COP, it's dealing with the climate issues. So I think I'm going to pass on the second. On the first, on the World Bank, I want to compliment our leader, the UAE, in resolving this issue as we entered the COP conference. They were able to put this issue forward. And I asked last year when we were talking about this at COP27, I think most of us felt that this fund would probably not be functioning for many years. The way that it's been set up, they're anticipating that it'll be available. They're going to already get into the leadership. They're moving it forward aggressively. And I think that's part of the structure, is to have an organization in place that can deliver on a much faster basis than was anticipated before, by having the type of management that can organize and get the funds out quickly. I think that's the reason why the World Bank was decided to be used. I don't know. I'm not part of that discussion, but I think that was one of the major reasons why. With that, you want us to give comments? Okay, I think we'll do it in reverse order, 1 minute, starting with Senator Schatz.
Thank you so much for being here. Look, the Inflation Reduction Act is the biggest action we've ever taken, and it's not enough. So that's the way we should understand every year, every week that we take action. Whatever we do, we should feel positive momentum, and whatever we do until we have resolved this crisis, and it will be decades before we resolve this crisis, we need to know that we're always going to need to do more.
Senator Markey.
Yeah, it's critical that this COP absolutely identify the cause of this disease which the planet is suffering from. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets. We have to put preventative care in place. We have to stop this curse of fossil fuels from further damaging this planet. The conference must end with a call for the phase out of the cause of this problem.
Senator Coons.
We've had a very productive engagement while here with a range of countries and parties from around the world, and reinforced the message that the United States is going to continue to make multi-billion-dollar investments year after year, regardless of our future political outcomes, because of the broad bipartisan support for it, because it's working on the ground, and because we're committed to innovation and to making this clean energy transition in close partnership with the rest of the world.
Senator Whitehouse.
2 quick points. One, watch the U.S. Methane Task Force. If it does a good job of rapid response to methane leaks and then sets an example so that the entire world can rapidly respond to and shut down methane leaks, then by the time we gather again for a COP, we could have made very significant progress on methane leakage and have very good prospects for really plugging that problem. The second thing is to remember that when governments come forward on loss and damage, we are picking up the tab for loss and damage that was caused by the fossil fuel industry.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you. COP is about a lot of words. That's what people are talking about right now, is a lot of the words, and whether the words are out or down or abate. But really, at the end of the day, it's about what comes out. What are the actions that come out that the countries that commit, or even if they haven't committed, actually then take steps to advance. And so, again, I think it's important to recognize what we have done in the United States with the policies that we've put in place and the reduction in emissions that we have seen, that we have led with. We haven't really talked with this group that much about the progress that we're seeing with clean energy from nuclear. The pledge for tripling nuclear is really quite significant in terms of ways and measures that we work to reduce those emissions. And so it really is an indicator going forward from here is what will you see in terms of the actions. And I think what the United States has demonstrated has been a course of great improvement in our reduced emissions and what we have done to lead on the technologies to help others as well.
Senator Carper.
We're coming off of the hottest year in the history of the planet. We see firestorms, floods, terrible disasters almost everywhere we look. And we have the opportunity to ignore that, pretend it's not happening, or to do something about it. As it turns out, President Macron of France said it, I think, very well. He talked about a joint session with Congress a couple of years ago, and he described our plan. He said, this is the only planet we're going to have. There's no planet B. No planet B. This is it. Another Frenchman guy named Camus once said that leaders are purveyors of hope. Leaders are purveyors of hope. And you got up here in front of you, 6 leaders in the United States Senate that are purveyors of hope. And we have a president who is a purveyor of hope as well. If you think, I like to think if, like Henry Ford used to say, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Think about that. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. We think we can. And I'll close with the quote from another great American, me. And the quote goes something like this: find what works, do more of that. Find out what works, do more of that. Find out what doesn't work, and don't do any more of that. There you go.
I just want to make an observation. 7 United States senators decided to spend a weekend coming to Dubai, spending about 27 hours in the air in order to spend 2 days here. The reason that's how important this conference is to our country and to the global community. Many of us were in Paris when we made the commitment of 1.5. We want to see that commitment honored. And yes, we're off track. We're not going to make the 1.5 under the current policies. But we're making adjustments, and it gives us hope we can make the 1.5. And I must tell you, I'm encouraged by what I've heard in regards to our interventions on the energy sector. We had just a meeting today on the oceans. They can do a lot more. There's a lot of options out there in order for us to do this. And I take from this conference a real commitment to say we're going to make the adjustments that are necessary to get to that 1.5. We have to do it. Stakes are too high, and we're paying the consequences of inaction. So I leave this conference energized for the United States to do more in our own country, but also to join the global community to make sure all nations can carry out their commitments. Thank you all very much for your attendance here.